You've felt it, haven't you? That strange silence that fills the room when nothing is demanding your attention. When the notifications stop, when the music ends, when there's nothing left to scroll through. And in that silence, something emerges. Not peace, not rest, something else. Something that makes you reach for your phone again, turn on another video, start another conversation you don't really want to have. Because what you found in that silence wasn't emptiness. It was presence. Your presence, and it terrified you. Most people think this is anxiety, or boredom, or loneliness. They pathologize it, medicate it, distract themselves from it. They fill every gap with noise, every pause with stimulation, every moment of potential silence with anything that drowns out that uncomfortable feeling of just being there, alone with themselves. And when you do this, when you run from this silence, you tell yourself you're being productive, social, engaged with life. But what if I told you that this silence you're running from, this void that makes you so uncomfortable, is actually the only authentic signal your existence is sending? What if the terror you feel isn't a warning that something is wrong, but a recognition that something is finally, devastatingly right? See, we've built entire lives around avoiding this moment. The moment when you're just there. No role to play, no task to complete, no identity to perform. Just raw, unmediated existence staring back at itself. And if you're like most people, you've never actually met that existence. You've spent decades constructing elaborate systems to make sure you never have to think about how you structure your days. The moment you wake up, you reach for your phone. You fill your commute with podcasts, your work hours with back-to-back meetings, your evenings with streaming services, your nights with social media until your eyes finally close. And on the surface, this looks like a full life. But here's what's actually happening. You're running, constantly, desperately, from the one thing you can never actually escape, yourself. The ancient Greeks called this horovakui, the fear of emptiness, but they were wrong. It's not the emptiness you fear, it's the fullness, the overwhelming, undeniable presence of your own being that emerges when everything else falls away. Because in that silence, you're forced to confront something unbearable. You exist, not as a collection of achievements or relationships or identities, not as the sum of your notifications or your productivity or your social media persona, just this raw fact of existence that doesn't need justification, can't be optimized, won't perform for an audience. And here's what you must understand. This feeling, this discomfort, this desperate need to fill the void with anything, even pain, even problems, even drama will destroy you. This isn't a bug in your psychology. It's the fundamental structure of human existence revealing itself. Martin Heidegger spent his entire philosophical career circling this phenomenon. This moment when being itself becomes unavoidable, he called it angst, not anxiety in the clinical sense, but the fundamental mood that emerges when you're confronted with the groundlessness of your own existence. You are not anxious about something, you are anxious about nothing, about the fact that beneath all your roles, your stories, your carefully constructed sense of self, there is this void, this silence, this naked existence that doesn't come with an instruction manual, or a purpose, or a meaning you didn't put there yourself. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you've spent your entire life in a room filled with mirrors. Everywhere you look, you see reflections. Yourself from every angle, in every light, performing every version of who you think you are. The successful you, the loved you, the interesting you, the damaged you, the healing you. These reflections feel so real that you've forgotten their reflections at all. You think this is what existence is? This constant performance, this endless presentation, this hall of mirrors where you're always looking at yourself, then one day, the lights go out. Just for a moment, and in that darkness, you realize something horrifying. You can't see the reflections anymore, but you're still there. You still exist. And without the mirrors to tell you who you are, without the reflections to confirm your identity, you have absolutely no idea what this existence is that you're experiencing. You reach out in the darkness, trying to find the light switch, trying to get the mirrors working again, because at least then you knew what you were looking at. Even if it was all reflection, even if it was all performance, at least it was something. This is what's happening in that silence you keep running from. The mirrors are going dark, the reflections are fading. And the raw fact of your existence, the thing that was always there underneath all the performance, is becoming unavoidable. Your first instinct, like anyone's, is to turn the lights back on, to get the mirrors working again, to fill the silence with noise, the void with stimulation, the darkness with any light at all, no matter how artificial. But here's the thing. Once you've felt that darkness, once you've sensed that there's something underneath all the reflections, the mirrors don't work the same way anymore. You can see the edges now. You can feel the performance as performance. And this creates the most unbearable psychological state imaginable. You can't fully believe in the reflections anymore, but you haven't yet learned how to exist in the darkness. So you're stuck in this liminal space, this in-between state, where everything feels hollow, but nothing else feels real. This is where most people panic. And in that panic, they make a critical mistake. They try to make the mirrors more convincing. They don't want deeper reflections. They want brighter ones, louder ones, more stimulating ones. If regular social media doesn't work anymore, they find more extreme content. If normal relationships don't feel real anymore, they create drama, conflict, intensity, anything to feel something, anything to convince themselves that the reflections are real, that the performance matters, that the void isn't there. But you know what happens when you do this? The mirrors get brighter, but the darkness gets darker. The stimulation increases, but the silence becomes more deafening. You need more and more intensity just to achieve the same level of distraction. The same sense of being someone, being anything other than this naked existence that terrifies you so completely. Now, here's what every psychology article and self-help guru will tell you to do. They'll say you need to find your purpose, discover your passion, build meaningful connections, practice mindfulness. These solutions all make the same assumption, that the void is the problem, that the silence is what needs to be fixed, that if you could just fill your life with the right things, meaningful things, authentic things, then that uncomfortable feeling of existing would finally go away. But this is like trying to fix a headache by thinking more intensely. The solution is not a better performance. It's not a more authentic reflection. It's not finding the right things to fill the void with. Because the void isn't a hole that needs filling. It's the ground. It's the foundation. It's the actual substance of what you are. And you've been treating it like a problem that needs solving. Heidegger described this as the difference between being absorbed in the world of things, what he called the they, and encountering your own being directly. Most people spend their entire lives in the first mode. They are what they do, what they own, what others think of them, what their roles demand of them, the accountant, the parent, the friend, the success story, the victim, the hero. All of these are ways of avoiding the more fundamental question. What is this being that's doing all of this performing? And here's where it gets strange. Here's where your mind will want to reject what I'm about to say because it sounds too simple, too quiet, too underwhelming to be the answer to something that feels this intense. The void that you're running from, the silence that terrifies you, is not your enemy. It's not a problem. It's not even really a void. It's presence. Pure, undiluted presence. The direct experience of existing without mediation, without reflection, without the need to be anything other than what you are in this exact moment. If this is resonating with you, if you're starting to see the architecture of your own avoidance, maybe it's time to join the space where we explore these depths every week. You know where the button is, but I can already hear your objection because presence sounds like nothing. It sounds boring. It sounds like the spiritual equivalent of watching paint dry. You've been trained to value intensity, excitement, stimulation, drama. You've built an entire identity around being interesting, being engaged, being alive in a way that's visible and shareable and worthy of attention. And what I'm describing sounds like the opposite of all of that. It sounds like giving up, like becoming passive, like accepting a kind of death. And here's the thing, you're right, it is a kind of death, but not the death of you, the death of the hall of mirrors, the death of the constant performance, the death of the need to be anything other than what you are. And yes, from inside the hall of mirrors, this looks like annihilation, because the reflections are all you've ever known. They're how you've defined yourself, measured yourself, known yourself. Without them, who even are you? But this is precisely the question that the silence is asking you. Who are you without the performance? What remains when the mirrors go dark? What is this existence that doesn't need to be performed, doesn't need to be interesting, doesn't need to be anything other than what it is? Let me tell you about someone, not their real name, but their real story. Call her Sarah. Sarah was what everyone would call successful, not rich, but comfortable, not famous, but respected in her field. Good relationships, active social life, impressive resume. She did everything right. And then, somewhere in her mid-30s, she started noticing something strange. The things that used to fill her time started feeling hollow. Not bad, just hollow. Like she was going through motions she could no longer justify. At first, she did what you're probably doing. She tried to make the activities more meaningful, she volunteered, she took up meditation, she read philosophy, she had deep conversations. And all of this helped, for a while, but the hollowness kept growing. Not like depression. She wasn't sad. She was just increasingly aware that all of this, all of the doing and being and achieving, was a kind of elaborate distraction from something she couldn't quite name. Then, one evening, she was alone in her apartment. No plans, no obligations, no messages to answer. And instead of reaching for her phone or turning on the TV or calling a friend, she just sat there, not meditating, not trying to be present, just sitting. And that's when she felt it. This overwhelming sense of just being there. No purpose, no meaning, no story, just raw existence. And it was the most terrifying thing she'd ever experienced. Her mind started racing. What am I doing with my life? What does any of this mean? Why am I here? Because without the constant activity, without the mirrors reflecting back a coherent identity, she had no idea what she was or why she was. And in that moment, she understood something that changed everything. All of her achievements, all of her relationships, all of her carefully constructed sense of self had been elaborate ways of avoiding this exact moment. This moment of just being, without justification, without purpose, without meaning. She didn't create herself. Most people, when they hit this moment, run faster. They double down on the distractions. They create new projects, new relationships, new crises to solve. But Sarah did something different. She stayed. Not because she was brave, but because she realized she was tired. Tired of running, tired of performing, tired of needing her existence to mean something before she could allow herself to just exist. And here's what she discovered. The void wasn't empty. The silence wasn't silent. When she stopped running from it, when she stopped trying to fill it or fix it or explain it away, she found something underneath all the performance. Not peace. Exactly. Not joy, not anything that can be packaged and sold as an insight, just this baseline hum of existence. This simple, undeniable fact of being here now, without needing it to be anything other than what it is. She still works, still has relationships, still does things, but there's a different quality to it now. Before, everything was about building and maintaining the reflections in the hall of mirrors. Every action was a performance for an audience, even if that audience was just herself. Now, things happen from a different place. Not from need, not from fear of the void, but from this strange sense of already being complete, already whole, before any of the doing even begins. This is what happens when you stop running from the silence. Not that the silence goes away, but that you realize it was never the enemy. It was always the ground you were standing on while you performed your elaborate dance of avoiding it. And if you're still here, if this is landing differently than the usual self-improvement content, consider subscribing. We go deeper into these territories every single week. Now, I must warn you about something. You might be thinking that I'm describing some kind of spiritual awakening, some transcendent state where you finally figure out the meaning of existence and everything becomes clear. But that's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps you trapped in the hall of mirrors. Because even the desire for awakening or enlightenment or profound realization is another performance, another reflection. Another way of avoiding the simple, unbearable fact that you already exist, right now, exactly as you are. And that existence doesn't need to mean anything to be exactly what it is. The void is not a problem to solve. The silence is not a gap to fill. That uncomfortable feeling you get when you're alone with yourself is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that you're finally, after years or decades of avoidance, coming into direct contact with the only thing that's real. Your own existence. Not your story about your existence. Not your interpretation or your performance or your carefully curated version. Just this raw, groundless fact of being here. Heidegger said that anxiety reveals the nothing. And most people hear that and think it sounds dark, nihilistic, depressing, but he meant something more radical. That anxiety, this fundamental unease you feel when you can't distract yourself anymore, reveals that there is no ground beneath you. No ultimate meaning handed down from the universe. No instruction manual for being human. Just this groundless existence that you've always been, that you've spent your whole life running from because it's too overwhelming to face directly. And here's the extraordinary thing. Once you stop running, once you allow yourself to just be in that groundlessness, something shifts. Not that you find the ground, not that the void gets filled, but that you realize you don't need the ground. You don't need the void to be filled. You are already, always, exactly what you are, and that is enough. Not enough in a self-help, affirmation kind of way, but enough in the sense that it's all there is, and all there ever was. And you were just so busy performing and avoiding and distracting that you never noticed. Think about it like this. You're a wave in the ocean, and you've spent your entire life trying to figure out what you're supposed to do, what makes you a good wave, what your purpose is as a wave. And the whole time, you're already the ocean. The wave is just a temporary form that the ocean takes. It's not separate. It's not distinct. It's not a thing that needs to justify its existence or prove its worth or find its meaning. It's just what the ocean is doing in this particular place at this particular time. But you can't see this while you're busy being a wave. While you're busy comparing yourself to other waves, trying to be bigger or more impressive or more meaningful, while you're busy trying to make sure you crash on the shore in just the right way to prove you mattered, you can only see it when you stop. When you sink back into the ocean, when you let go of the need to be a wave at all. This is what the silence is offering you. Not a better performance, not a more meaningful role, but the recognition that you are not the performance, you are not the role. You are the ocean pretending to be a wave, and the pretending has become so convincing that you've forgotten what you actually are, and this is terrifying. Because if you're not the wave, if you're not your achievements, or your relationships, or your stories, or your carefully constructed identity, then what are you? And the answer is nothing. And everything. And the space where those two meet is what you've been calling the void. But the void was never empty. You were just looking at it from inside the hall of mirrors, where everything has to be a reflection of something else, where nothing is allowed to just be what it is. The void is what's left when you remove all the reflections. It's not absence, it's presence. Pure, undiluted, unmediated presence. The direct experience of existing without needing that existence to be anything in particular. Make sure you hit that like button if this is making sense. Drop a comment about your own experience with this silence, and subscribe if you want to keep exploring these territories with me. Now, you might be wondering what you're supposed to do with this information. How do you stop running from the void? How do you learn to exist in the silence? And here's where I need to be very clear. You can't, not in the way you think, because any attempt to do this, any technique or practice or method, is just another performance. Another way of avoiding the direct encounter with what you are. The you that wants to stop running is the same you that's running. The you that wants to learn to exist in the silence is the same you that's afraid of the silence. You can't fix this by doing something. You can only stop doing everything else. And I know how unsatisfying that sounds. Your mind wants a technique, a practice, a step-by-step guide. But techniques and practices are ways of doing things, and what I'm describing is what happens when you stop doing, when you stop performing, when you stop trying to be anything other than what you already are. So here's what I can offer you. Not a method, but a recognition. Notice what you do when you feel that silence emerging. Notice how quickly you reach for your phone, how automatically you start thinking about problems you need to solve or conversations you need to have. Notice how the mind creates drama, worry, planning, anything to avoid just being there, in that moment, with nothing to do and nowhere to go and no one to be. And then, maybe just for a moment, don't do the thing you normally do. Don't reach for the phone, don't start thinking, don't create the drama. Just notice what's there when you don't fill the space. Not peace, not bliss, not anything Instagram-worthy. Just this baseline hum of existence. This simple fact of being here, without embellishment, without interpretation, without needing it to be anything other than exactly what it will be uncomfortable. Your mind will tell you this is boring, this is a waste of time, this isn't leading anywhere. And it's right. This isn't leading anywhere. That's the point. You've spent your entire life going somewhere, being someone, moving toward something, and the void is what's there when you stop. When you arrive at the place you already are. And here's the paradox. You can't force this. You can't make yourself stop running because the one who would force it is still running, still performing, still in the hall of mirrors trying to find the perfect reflection. The stopping happens when you get tired, when the performance exhausts itself, when you realize that no matter how fast you run, you can't escape the one thing you're trying to avoid, yourself, your own existence. The groundless ground of being that you are. What you need to stop doing is more important than what you need to start doing. Stop filling every moment with stimulation. Stop treating silence like a problem. Stop pathologizing the discomfort of existing. Stop looking for meaning in places that can't provide it. Stop performing for an audience that doesn't exist. Stop running from the only thing that's real. And when you stop, when you finally allow yourself to just be there, in that silence that terrified you so much, you might discover something strange. The terror was never about what you would find in the void, it was about losing the reflections, losing the hall of mirrors, losing the carefully constructed sense of self that you thought was you, but you're not the reflections you never were. You're what the reflections are made of. You're the light that makes the mirrors work. And when you stop identifying with the reflections, when you stop needing them to tell you who you are, you realize something that changes everything. You were never lost. You were never broken. You were never missing anything. You were just so busy looking at reflections that you forgot to notice what was doing the looking. This is not growth. This is not improvement. This is not becoming a better version of yourself. This is the death of the version of yourself that needed to become better. The death of the performance, the death of the constant striving and achieving and becoming. And yes, it feels like death because something is dying. The wave is realizing it's the ocean. The reflection is realizing it's the light. The performance is realizing it's the stage. And when that dies, what remains is not nothing. It's everything. It's this groundless ground of pure presence that doesn't need to be anything, doesn't need to mean anything, doesn't need to go anywhere. It's already complete, already whole, already exactly what it is. You are in the middle of this process now. That silence that terrifies you, that void that you keep filling with noise and distraction and drama, that is not your enemy. That is not a problem. That is the sound of the reflections falling away. That is the feeling of the hall of mirrors going dark. That is what it's like when you stop performing and start existing. And I know it feels unbearable. I know it seems easier to just keep running, keep performing, keep filling the void with anything that drowns out the silence, but you can't, not anymore, because you've already seen behind the mirrors, you've already felt the ground drop away. You've already tasted that strange, uncomfortable, overwhelming presence of your own existence. And once you've felt that, you can't unfeel it. You can only decide whether you're going to keep running from it or finally, allow yourself to just be it. Before I bring this full circle, take a second to engage with this video, like it if it's hitting different. Comment about your own experience with this void, and subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into these territories with me every single week. Here's what's actually happening. You are not losing your capacity to be engaged with life. You are not becoming depressed or dissociated or disconnected. You are evolving past the need for constant stimulation, constant performance, constant reflection. You are discovering that existence itself, without any embellishment, without any story, without any meaning you impose on it, is enough. Not enough in a satisfying way, but enough in the sense that it's all there is, and it's already exactly what it is. And no amount of performance or achievement or meaning-making will make it more or less than what it already is. This is what the great existentialists understood, Kierkegaard with his leap of faith, Nietzsche with his Amor Fati, Camus with his absurd hero. They all circled the same truth, that existence precedes essence, that you are not born with a purpose or a meaning or a nature, you simply are. And everything else, all the meanings and purposes and identities, are things you create, not things you discover. But we've forgotten this. We've built entire civilizations around avoiding this recognition. We've created systems and structures and stories that tell us who we are, what we're worth, what we're supposed to do. And these systems are so convincing, so all-encompassing, that we mistake them for reality. We think the reflections are what we are. We think the performance is real. Until one day, you're sitting in silence, and you realize it's all been a show. Not a bad show, not a meaningless show, but a show nonetheless. And underneath the show, underneath all the performance and reflection and meaning-making, is this simple, groundless, overwhelming fact. You exist. Not as anything in particular, not for any particular reason. Just this naked, undeniable presence that doesn't need justification or explanation or purpose. And this is what terrifies you. Not that you're lost, not that you're broken, not that something is wrong, but that nothing was ever wrong. That you are already, always, exactly what you are. And all the running, all the performing, all the filling of the void with noise and stimulation and drama was just a way of avoiding this unbearably simple truth. The void was never empty. It was just so full of pure presence, so saturated with direct, unmediated existence that your mind couldn't process it. So it called it emptiness. It called it boredom. It called it anxiety. It called it anything other than what it actually was. The direct experience of being, without the need to be anything in particular. You already know this. That's why you're still here. That's why this is landing differently than the usual content that promises you fulfillment or purpose or meaning if you just follow the right steps. Because somewhere deep down, underneath all the performance, you already know that the steps don't lead anywhere. That the purpose you're searching for is just another reflection in the hall of mirrors. That the meaning you're trying to create is just another way of avoiding the meaninglessness that's actually there. And meaninglessness is not the problem, it's the solution. Because only when you stop trying to make your existence mean something can you allow it to just be what it is. Only when you stop running from the void can you discover that it was never empty. Only when you stop performing for the mirrors can you realize that you are the light, not the reflection. This is what the silence is telling you. Not that something is wrong. Not that you need to fix yourself or find yourself or improve yourself. But that you are already there. You have always been there. You just haven't noticed because you've been too busy looking at reflections, performing for an audience that doesn't exist, filling the void that was never empty. The void is not your enemy. It's your ground. It's your home. It's what you are when you stop being anything else. And yes, it's terrifying, because it means letting go of everything you thought you were. Every story, every identity, every carefully constructed sense of self. But what you find on the other side of that terror is not nothing. It's everything. It's this groundless ground of pure being. It's the ocean underneath the wave. It's the light behind the mirror. It's the silence that contains all sound. And it's been there the whole time, waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice. You're already there. You just haven't noticed. The void was never empty. You were just looking away.